This session is being recorded. Delighted to welcome. We've got almost 50 people in the room. Welcome, everybody. Lovely to have you here. And delighted to welcome Lindsay and Damien from Learning Pool. I started doing work with Learning Pool, goodness me, must be 15 years ago. A long time ago. I've known Lindsay all that time. It's been a long time. Awesome stuff. Delighted to have you in the session today. Looking at learning in the flow of work being made simple with on-screen guidance. Please do continue the chat, everybody. But I'm going to hand over to Lindsay and to Damien. I put you both on mute, guys, so you'll need to unmute. But welcome and delighted to have you here.
Thanks, Andrew.
Good morning. Yep, thank you, Andrew.
Okay, so I'm going to kick us off today. So we're here today to talk to you about digital adoption within organisations. In the loosest sense, I said we're really here to talk about kind of learning in the workflow. The reason that we kind of combine those two is that some of the tools that we use for digital adoption can really help us put learning in the workflow in other ways as well. So that's one of the areas that we'll be talking to you about today. So the first thing we're going to do, because I'm aware as soon as it came out of my mouth, is actually, do people know what digital adoption, what I mean by digital adoption? So I think if we go to the next slide, and then we actually have a way that we can ask you that question and ask you to comment back. I don't know whether that's just in the chat or oh, it looks like there's a special chat area for you to be able to put your thoughts in there.
There's a special chat area. So what is digital adoption? So we've opened up this box here. What's your understanding of what digital adoption is? Please do let us know. I can see Jack is already thinking about typing, and there's a few other people who are typing as well. Just in that space there, please do tell us what you think digital adoption is. We hear it a lot in learning and development, and I'm keen, and Lindsay and Damien and I were talking about this earlier in the week. What do you think digital adoption is? What is digital adoption?
So I can see that Jack's already commented saying that he was part of the rollout of WalkMe at Warner Music. So that WalkMe is a very similar tool in some ways. I'm sure Damien will go into more detail about kind of the differences and things like that later. But yeah, it really is a game changer. I don't know how, I'm sure many of you have worked in L&D for a long time. I actually used to, before I was head of innovation at Learning Pool, I headed up our content teams, both library and bespoke. And one of the things that we used to often get asked for was that kind of, we're rolling out a new software system within the organization. Can you do us some training for it? So I'm sure many of you that work in L&D have been responsible for kind of using the various tools available to take screenshots, putting them into general authoring tools, or using, the names escape me now, is it Captivate that does all the kind of click throughs where it will literally follow you, it will record your screen as you do it. So
there's loads of people writing. I think it's great because I can see loads of people writing, but we've just not got the answers. But let's have a look. So Stephen says it's not pen and paper. So something that isn't pen and paper is digital adoption. Michael, digital tools to accelerate manual processes. Christina says it's inevitable, and I think you're 100% right there. Simon, making the most of the tech available. Yeah, some people don't know how to send an email. I remember doing digital adoption in the banking industry. People didn't know how to use a mouse, and they would, when you said point your mouse at the screen, I'm just going to put my camera back on here and show you this. So let me just share my screen. When we said point your mouse at the screen, people did that. Literally, exactly.
People I work in tech support too, Andrew. I saw that one coming myself.
It's bananas. So digital adoption.
To the video of how to use a mouse, I never quite worked out, but yeah, I mean, I've been in learning technologies a very long time, so yeah, it was always an interesting one.
Well, my favorite, Lindsay, was when people would phone up and say, the instruction says press the any key, and I'm looking at my keyboard and I don't see the any key anywhere.
Any key? Yeah. Any key, yeah. And the one where people use the mouse and they couldn't, just move your mouse to the right. I can't. Why not? Because I'm right on the edge of the mouse mat. And they didn't realise they could pick the mouse up and move it across. So yeah, we've all got war. So we've been in this industry long enough. I'm just having a look and seeing what
There's some really good
everybody
ones
else.
actually that
Matt,
would really cover
there are
some
some
of
lovely
this.
ones.
Yeah.
Which ones stand out? Which ones stand out for you? Is there any that
I
stand
quite
out for
like
you?
the transforming manual processes into digital workflows from Anne Catherine, without me, because she's made the point of without replicating the manual approach, so making sure that we're doing things better, rather than just literally kind of putting the process, using the processes that we've always had, but with different tools, which just makes no sense a lot of the time. So.
Awesome. I'm going to close this window down shortly. What I will be doing is I recommend people, if you want to, you can, excuse me, if you want to copy that text out, you can do, or you can look at it in the when we do the recording. Recommend having a look, and just because it does help understand this for people, it does help people understand it. We're seeing it with the use of AI and other technology, and you're absolutely right, it is inevitable. But being able to describe it in different ways, change from manual to digital, train without having to take away from the system, etc. Absolutely. Right, I'm going to close that window down and go back to presenting, and then back to you, Lindsay. You've got control of the slides as well.
Perfect, thank you. I just forgot that actually, so that's good to know. I was about to ask you to move on and then realised I could do it. So thank you, everyone. Really good to get that level of engagement and interaction, to hear what you think digital adoption is. And as I said, I think digital adoption is really vital to lots of organisations, especially when you're rolling out often very expensive new systems. And the idea is that they will make your business more efficient. They will make kind of the quality of the data that you store and all a lot better, and things like that. But the reality is we need to get people using them, and we need to get people using them well. So I think what it's really about is there's lots of reasons kind of why people behave in the ways that they do. So obviously there's the knowledge of a new system, knowing how it works and how to use it. But there's also lots around kind of culture. And I think that was why I liked the comment that came up earlier about kind of not necessarily just transferring the manual processes. We want people to kind of think a bit differently. We want them to be able to almost make these tools their own and use them in the way that makes the most sense, not just kind of follow a process. Obviously, we do need them to follow the processes as well, but doing it in a way that they buy into, that they understand. And that's a lot of what digital adoption is about for us at Learning Pool. We're very keen that it's kind of bottom up rather than top down, basically. And rather than it kind of being kind of dictated to people how they use the system, giving some of that control to the teams and making sure that they have the ability to use the system, but also to train and disseminate that knowledge. So this quote here is from the HCM report in 2020. So it's not a particularly, sorry, just realised I've got to go forward on the slides. It's not a particularly new quote, but I don't know how much we've actually moved on. So the number one difficulty identified by digital transformation leadership and project teams was transforming the organisational culture. So as I said, that's really organisational culture, or the culture of the people that we want to be using it, is really key here. And by that, we mean kind of the values, the behaviours and the mindset of the workforce, because no digital transformation is going to succeed unless the people in the organisation are engaged and empowered to contribute to those processes. So as I said, the problem with kind of typical top down, where the leadership sets the vision and pushes it down through the organisation, is it often misses those key inputs from the people who really know those processes. So by making sure that they are involved all the way, then we empower them. We give them that opportunity to make them feel like the new software that's coming in is actually for them and going to help them within their organisation. And it's also about kind of making sure that the knowledge isn't siloed, that it's not kind of like 2 or 3 people in this corner over here that know how this process works or how this system works. It's making sure that everyone has kind of the ability to actually use it in the way that they need to for their role. Okay. So I think this is a slightly scary statistic. The average large enterprise has over 1,000 SaaS applications with a 5.2% increase year on year. And it's not just that they have that much software. It's also that kind of things are always changing. So it's not just about the new rollouts. It's also about kind of how people use them on an ongoing basis. But yeah, if you think about all the software that you have within your business, I'm sure there's huge amounts of it. And as I said earlier, the challenge isn't necessarily the software itself, it's how different bits of software interact with each other. It's about how different teams interact, and all those kind of things. So where we've got employees constantly switching between different platforms, maybe there's a new platform that's come in, but also if they need to be updated, maybe processes have changed, maybe the provider of the software has changed it and they've gone to a different version. All of those are kind of key learning points, and where people need to be able to very quickly get up to speed and know what they need to do. And the best way to do that is really to make sure that they have the support that they need in the workflow. And if we can do that, then we mean that then we're not having to take them away from the work that they're doing. They can just get that extra support or that extra help they need whilst they're doing the tasks that they need to carry out. I know this is something that Josh Bursan talks about a lot. It's that kind of learning in the workflow isn't taking people away to do a little bit of e-learning when they need it. It's an element of it, and that's a step in the right direction. But it's mainly really about kind of literally somebody gets to a point, they're stuck, and they're kind of like, I don't know what I need to do now. How can we unstick them? I was talking to someone yesterday about the amount of hours wasted, particularly when you've got new people and they don't know who to turn to. Maybe they're working remotely, maybe their boss or their manager or the person sat next to them doesn't happen to be there. They could waste quite a lot of time if they don't know what to do. So how can we kind of democratize that knowledge and make it easier for people? Okay. So this one is about kind of every employee is kind of a new end learner. As we said, things are constantly changing. So whether it is new, whether it's a change to a system, employees can get quite frustrated and really feel like they're starting over again and again and again. They almost feel kind of like just as they're getting comfortable with it, the technology changes. And this can be a generational thing, but it's a general frustration, particularly when people are new in role and things like that. They want to be able to perform, they want to be able to kind of hit the ground running and be useful as soon as they can. And I think it's up to the organisations to make sure that the employees can do that, that they can use the tools at their disposal. And almost we talk a lot about kind of learning culture and a continuous learning environment within organisations. That's something that as at L&D, we really have the power to be able to do and to help our people. And it's not just about that kind of support necessarily right in the moment. It's also about maybe there's some more complex processes that people only do, I don't know, once a year or something. I think pivot tables in spreadsheets are one of the things that always gets quoted in this. It's not something you need to do often. So a lot of the time when you do need to go and do it, you actually have to go and find a video or something on how to do that. So digital adoption tools really are looking at how we can bring that into someone's workflow so that they don't have to go elsewhere to find it. And so that reduces the time and hopefully reduces the frustration as well. So kind of the intersection of sort of the organisational learning, the culture and processes, and the knowledge management is this continuous workforce enablement. And you notice I use the term enablement because it's enabling people to perform in their job. It's not necessarily about learning. It might be that actually having the support at the point of need is more important than them learning it by rote and being able to perform it every time, because as I said, they might not do it that often. And really where we want to get to is we want our organisations to not just keep up with change, but we want them to embrace it really, and to really feel that they are contributing and that they have that power to be able to work in that way. So gaps in traditional employee training for digital adoption is what I'm going to talk about just a little bit before I hand over to Damien to dive into a bit more detail about some of the tools that you can use for this. So we're looking at the ability for employees to effectively use technology in their daily work. We want to build a learning culture, but the reality is most of our people just want to be able to do their jobs. And I mentioned kind of upfront some of the ways that we've tried to do this over time. So when I've been involved in huge kind of digital rollouts where people have done everything from creating e-learning modules, as I said, this goes back as far as literally taking screenshots, putting a red box around the button they were meant to click, and doing it that way. Obviously these days we tend to do it more through kind of e-learning might have video or might have kind of software simulations, that kind of sort of watch, practice, assess kind of thing. So you've got that kind of stage process, and that does help, but you're not in the real system. So it's fine to kind of get the basics, but it's not going to get them all the way there. We've also often had things like instructor-led training, or you might have floor walkers. So you might get people in a classroom to do similar kind of simulations and working through. And then you might have people literally on the floor when you first roll out for a week or two, going around asking people if they're okay, seeing if anybody looks stuck or looks really confused. And that goes back to some of this kind of literally making sure people know how to use their mouse and how to use the system and log in and things like that. Also seen manuals. I mean, I don't think anyone's ever picked up a manual really, unless they're really stuck and looking at something really specific for a piece of software. We shouldn't need to. It should be easy to use. It should be intuitive, but we know that they're not always. So yeah, I don't think manuals are necessarily the way to go. But as I said, e-learning can be helpful. Courses, webinars, tutorials, there's plenty that we can do. But all of this kind of takes you away from what you're doing. And also a lot of this is kind of upfront. It's not when you're using the system. So that's where we feel quite strongly that you can really make a big difference. There's some statistics that we can share with you that employees can spend nearly 20% of their working week searching for information that they need. When you think about kind of what that equates to, that's a fifth of someone's salary annually if they're not able to just get on and do their job. So we feel that digital adoption platforms can really help with this. I must admit, when I was head of content at Learning Pool, my heart would always slightly sink when we were asked to do kind of system simulation training, because we knew it was really challenging. And the other thing that was challenging is often the system isn't signed off until it pretty much the day it goes live. There's always those changes coming through. So that means that all that kind of upfront work that you're doing can be out of date before it's even gone live. And that's quite difficult. I mean, it's frustrating for the teams that are creating the learning, but it's also frustrating for the learners, because often what would happen is you don't have time to update it. So therefore they wouldn't match. If you're using something like a DAP, then it's so quick to create kind of the walkthroughs and the guides that actually you can do it right up to the last minute. You can change them really easily if things change and things like that. So it does have quite a big impact on how people work and how quickly they can get up to speed. So, as I said, what we're really looking to do, and I've gone through kind of some of the old ways, but this is a more kind of holistic view of it, kind of in terms of what we used to do. So moving from what people need to know to what we need them to do, making sure that rather than it being kind of very L&D focused, and it says L&D centric here, but I think it can almost be L&D intensive, because learning and development are really having to drive quite hard to get people up to speed before they get on the system. Whereas kind of the new way is making it much more learner centric, so that the learner is in control, they can learn when they need it, so when they're doing that particular process and things like that. Moving from kind of static user resources to dynamic ones that can change as the system changes. In person to virtual. And it doesn't have to be virtual. People might be in an office, they might still be sat next to each other. You're not going to stop people asking each other, and that's great. But it does mean when people are on their own that they have that ability to get that support that they need. And again, that kind of goes back to that on demand and things like that, and making sure that we're outcome focused. So focusing again on what we want people to be able to do rather than what we want them to know. And obviously, finally, what we're here to talk about today, learning within the workflow. And I think what we were going to do now is do a poll. So I'm hoping that Andrew will jump back in and help me with that. Marvellous.
I am here, the voice of, from around the back. So I've opened a poll up, and there are 8 options there. So the how-to guides, learner-centric, etc. Just on the back of the previous slide, as Lindsay was saying. So that move from one to the other. How many of those are you doing right now? You can pick as many of those as you want to. So we've got 50 odd people in the room. Please do just click and say which of those are you doing, and you can see the results. You can see them moving up and down, which is quite cool. And people are beginning to click on them now, and there's definitely some favorites here. I'll give people a few more moments. Which of these are you doing? How-to guides, or how-to-do guides, I should say, learner-centric, dynamic user resources, virtual, in whatever that may be, blended contextual learning, on-demand, outcome-focused, and learning in the workflow. And we can see that there are some which are very popular. So, like I said, 50 odd people in the room, 80% of people of the responses, hardly favorites, but that's the way it is. Absolutely. Is it favorites, or is it things that we do? Simon, all of them, depending on the request, which is balanced between business and L&D recommendations. But yeah, of the people who've responded, 80% of people
it's actually made me realise that probably people can mean quite
Lindsay?
different things by how-to-do guides. So feel free to put in the chat as well if there's a specific way that you're doing that, because it could be a digital adoption platform where you've literally got it in the workflow, although I'm guessing maybe not, because learning in the workflow has actually come out quite low. So I'm guessing that a lot of those are maybe kind of like checklist, crib sheet type things, maybe that people can access quite easily, and things like that. So yeah, I'd be interested to know kind of what people are thinking on that. But
well, one of my favorite how to do guides was a GIF that we made. So what we did is we took 7 screenshots, annotated them, and then sent them out to people. And so that arguably is a how to do guide, but in a very much digital approach. Just like I said, just putting a GIF. We liked it because it was very low bandwidth, which was a really neat way to do it. On demand is 68%, virtual is 70% of the responses.
I think the fact that virtual is so high is not a massive surprise, actually, just because, it is quite high, isn't it? So I was getting confused between the numbers that are voted and the percentages. I guess that's just a sign of the times of where we are, basically. A lot of people are going to be working remotely, so therefore they need to be able to access those and things like that. Pleased to see that kind of like 50% are blended contextual learning and on demand, because I think that's really kind of what people need, basically, that ability to... I said, there's not a one-size-fits-all. One way of doing things is probably not going to get the best results for the organisation. You probably want to do something around the kind of culture piece first, the setting the scene, and that's even before that piece, that software goes live. Making sure that people understand kind of where they why it's being brought in. And I mean, that probably starts at procurement in a way. It's kind of like, what is not working about what we've got now, and then taking that to the positives of the new system and things like that. So yeah, absolutely, really interesting.
Yeah. Great question from Andrew. Would you say dynamic is resources, as in the same content available in various multimedia formats? So having the same content that people can draw down in different ways. Is that what you mean by dynamic, or do you have some other kind of understanding? So it's a dynamic user resources.
I think it's about resources that adapt to where you are. So more contextual probably than different formats. So for example, it would know which, so you might use let's take Salesforce. It's an awful example, but it's just always the one that pops into my head. You might have a different process that goes on the same screen. So it needs to know kind of the process that you're doing, as well as what you're trying to do, if that makes sense. So I think that's the dynamic contextual piece. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the comment from Kat. That's brilliant. Kat is how to is sometimes seen as the cheap option. So just make a quick explainer video, which was then done in an amateur way, and that can work. But if that's all that there
And you're
is,
right, it can work, but
then there's an
sometimes,
issue.
I don't know about how other people feel, I find it quite frustrating, especially if you've only got one screen. Probably easier if you've got two, but you're literally kind of like pausing it whilst you do the bit and then you play it again. And then if you've only got one screen, you're flicking between the two. Can be a challenge, but definitely done well,
Yeah,
it can really impact as well.
that's why we did the GIF, because the GIF is small and literally it just continued. You can't pause it, but it just carried, it just carried on and on and on. So if you missed it, it didn't matter, because in 8 seconds you knew you were going to get back to the thing you were looking at again, and that just worked really, really well. And Kat said, yeah, exactly, it's a start. Yeah. Simon used to have system process screenshots and still may need this through time constraints, but just having a space for people to go and practice. So out of the flow of work, but just recognizing not everything can be in the flow of work, and sometimes you do have to put it outside. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to close the poll down. Let me just end that poll. So we've got the final results. Again, really interesting from the people who voted. Thank you for your votes and so on. I'm going to have a look at that after, because there's definitely something, a lack of outcome focus there, which I'm spending all my time talking to people about value and outcome right now. So I'm going to have a look and see who voted and where that came from. So I will shift the screens back and we'll go back to the
Perfect,
image.
thank you.
Brilliant
And I
stuff.
think at
Paula,
that
back to
point,
you
I
again.
am actually going to hand over to Dee, who's going to talk a little bit more in the realms of kind of digital adoption platforms and what they can do.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. And again, it's great to kind of start off with the context of how digital adoption is changing and how technology is changing, how learning is changing, and putting things in the workflow. My role in Learnable as a solutions engineer is to talk about this in a much more real sense. Like literally, tell me the problems that you're having, tell me the issues that you're currently facing, and how can we solve those with OnScreen, our digital adoption platform. And again, I normally start off by talking about the differences really between consumer software and enterprise software to give people a sense of why this is even necessary. It'll come as no surprise to all the people on this webinar that in 2025, there's a huge gap between consumer software and enterprise software. Consumer software means you can hand your iPhone to a 5-year-old and they'll go off and be watching YouTube and downloading Roblox and spending all your money with no help from you whatsoever. But if you were to give somebody with a degree in finance access to Salesforce for the very first time and ask them to go and run your report, create an account, something like that, they would be scratching their head if you did not give them some instruction. ERPs are inherently complex because a lot of times they are providing everything that a company needs to run. Again, as Lindsay mentioned, we will ask people, how are you training people right now? This is, again, the poll that we just did is very, very evident of the way people are training people. But more often than not, it's how to do guides. We might put people in a classroom and talk at them for half a day or a full day. And again, as Lindsay said, with a forgetting curve, most people are going to forget 70% of what they've learned within the next day or the day after if you do not apply what you've learned right away. And this is what we find out when we talk to people. Everyone gets that training, but it could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks before they actually have to apply what they've learned, by which they've completely forgotten it. And then again, we think to ourselves, well, we've created a lot of how-to guides, we've created a lot of videos. We know people are going to go and find those and access them. But in reality, what happens is people tend to tap the shoulder of the person next to them, or in 2025, give a virtual tap on Slack or Teams or something like that and say, do you know how to do this? Can you help me? And a lot of times you end up with this blind leading the blind situation. And again, McKinsey put out a report that they estimated, as Lindsay says, 20% or 9.6 hours a week is wasted week on, week out by people looking for information that they should already have just to do their job. And this is where digital adoption can be a big game changer in that respect. So the OnScreen, what we do is we help in 3 key areas: onboarding and training costs. And again, as we've all discussed earlier, onboarding in the traditional sense of new people coming into your organization that need to be trained up, that's onboarding. But technology never stays still. So even then, when you get a major update to an existing system, when you buy a new system, existing staff have to be onboarded onto that as well. And the more quickly you can do that, then the faster you can get those people performance ready. That is a salary return back into your business again, if you can do that quickly and efficiently. The second point, productivity and process efficiency. Again, if I'm doing a task, I want to be able to get through it quickly and efficiently. If it's those tasks that I'm coming back to that I maybe haven't done for a while, as Lindsay said as well, I can hit the ground running because there's guidance there that's going to show me exactly what I'm supposed to do and in what order. And then the third one, and probably the most important one, data quality and process accuracy. There's no point doing something quickly if I'm doing it wrong. So again, making sure everyone's following the same guidance, everyone's being consistent, we're entering the right information in the right fields and things like that. Again, a lot of times I'll talk to people when I'm doing these demos and they'll say something as simple as putting information in the wrong format in a field, then screws up a report that happens, and then resourcing decisions are made on that report. So then we overspend or we underspend or we over-resource. So all these little things can have a massive knock-on effect. And this, again, we hear this from people all the time in the real world. So those are the three main areas. These are then exacerbated when you think about these impact multipliers. And again, some of these we've touched on already, but things like high turnover, if you have people coming and going from your business, making sure that you can upskill the new people quickly. Sometimes it could even be that you have somebody who's going off on maternity leave or long-term sick, or maybe somebody's retiring from the business and you think, that was my person for that. That was my expert in that area. How am I going to backfill that person's knowledge when they leave? So making sure that you can cope with just the coming and going of talent, let's say. Non-technical workforce, again, we work with so many people who work in manufacturing or warehousing where jumping on a computer is not their number one job. It's not what they're doing every day, but it is a necessary part of their job for requisition orders, for performance reviews and things like that. So again, making sure that when they do have to go to those tasks, they don't have to scratch their head for a while thinking, how do I do this again? Or am I doing this right? Regulatory compliance. Compliance changes all the time. So again, making sure that people are following the latest thing. This can be particularly whenever we talk to people who say, well, I have people who do this job all day, every day. So they would never look for guidance because they know it inside and out. But making sure we can notify them when a process changes or has to change, or we did it that way before, but now we're going to change it. So communication is a big thing with OnScreen as well. Complex and seasonal processes. Again, we kind of touched on that. There's things you might do once a year, once a quarter. Again, year-end close, quarter-end close, things like that. So making sure when I do those things that I don't do often, that I can get in and do them accurately without, again, having to look around for last year's guidance. Changes in new projects. This is one that comes up all the time. Lindsay touched on this one actually as well. We talk about whenever people buy a new system, they will normally turn to their infrastructure team or their IT team and say, we bought this thing, can you not integrate it? When it's getting near the point of rollout, they will typically turn to a team like Lindsay's, like the L&D team or the instructional design team and say, can you now create me some help, some guidance for this? They then say, well, what did you buy? Oh, we bought this thing. So then the L&D team have to learn the thing that was bought from the IT team who are learning it from the people that they bought it from. And you can see there's a lot of to and fro that goes on there. And as Lindsay quite rightly said, sometimes by the time you get to it's being rolled out, the guidance that was built is already out of date and has to be changed. So with OnScreen, with our platform, we have made it so simple for people to create the guidance that you don't even need that instructional design team anymore. The people who are building it, the experts in the system, are the ones who can create the guidance. So that because they are generally the SMEs anyway, so they can absolutely be the people who create the help, create the guidance in our tool. And then the very last one, customized system. Again, anyone who uses Salesforce knows that, I mean, we use Salesforce at Learnable. Our Salesforce looks radically different to anyone else's Salesforce coming in there. And we change it ourselves. You know, we have very much changed, for example, our opportunities page to make sure that what we're offering people is a much more value-driven conversation right from day one, to make sure that what we're doing is focusing on outcomes and making sure that anything and everything we do is providing value back to our customer, whether that's time saved, money saved, or simply headaches saved as well. And we want to make sure all that information is captured all the way through. But the point is, everyone has their own version of a system that they would use. So that's those impact multipliers. Now, I'll skip over that side. Basically, whenever people use OnScreen, we have found the productivity can increase up to 3 times with half the time spent doing these various activities that normally you spend a bit of time looking for. And this is how we do it. OnScreen provides contextual guided walkthroughs. We basically overlay help on a complex screen. That is what we do. The best analogy I ever heard for OnScreen is, imagine there's an expert standing over your shoulder, pointing at the screen, saying, okay, you got to fill this in here. You got to click here. You can ignore those fields for now, and then you got to fill that in. That is exactly what it is, because we can get the experts to create the guidance, and in their own real language, they can say, here's why this has to go here. This is why you have to skip this step at this point. This is why that has to be done. So you have your own people talking to your own people, creating all of these guides. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually show you just some of the output here. So I'm going to stop here on my slides. And I'm going to attempt to find where my share button is now. Andrew, maybe you can help me out here. Share my screen. There we are. So now I click that and click that. And if I've done all that in the right order, you guys should now be able to see my screen okay, yeah?
Yeah, your screen has come up. For the people, if the text is all a bit small, don't panic. What you can do is there are two options. One is the 100% option, which will actually view the screen as the actual size, which is Damien's screen, which will be very, very big. Or you might want to go to full screen mode. If you go to full screen mode, you'll lose the chat and so on, but you will have a much bigger view of the screen. So if that helps you, please feel free to zoom the screen up.
Thank you. And again, I'm not going to spend too much time in this demo, but I just thought it would be beneficial, because we've been talking about it for so long, to show you what it looks like. So this is what it looks like for a user. So this, what you see on the screen right here, is an announcement. That's one of the tools that you can use with OnScreen. It's one of my personal favorites, because I'm a big believer that 99% of all problems that happen are due to bad communication or no communication. So with this, what you can do is you can put an announcement, you can put a message in the path of work. I was talking to somebody who's using OnScreen now, and they said what they're using this for. And I love this example. He says part of their sales workflow is they will get so far into a process, and then at that point, the salesperson can either send that information in an email with a single click, or they can send it through their app, which takes a few more clicks. It's a bit more effort, but they have sales data that says that they have a greater than 50% conversion rate, more if it goes through the app than through an email. So they have an announcement pops up at that point in the process where somebody can send that information. It says, remember, we have a greater than 50% conversion rate if you send it through the app. Since they put that on, nobody sends it through the email anymore. Everyone sends it through the app, and sales numbers went up. Such a simple intervention, just reminding people this is best practice. I know it's a bit more effort, but we get better results if you do it this way. Other things you can use announcements for is things like, we have changed this process now. Remember to do this way instead of that way that you've been doing it for the last 6 months. So an announcement, you can put this on any web page. I should say as well, OnScreen will work on any browser-based platform, and it will work between those platforms as well. So as long as it has a URL, you can put an announcement there. So it can be at the start of the process, halfway through a process. You can also target teams with this as well. So you can decide, I only need my sales team to see this, but I don't need any other teams to see it. You can also target how often they see it. For example, as well, it can be, I want a person to see this once, they click the I'm ready button, and it vanishes, and they never see it again. I have mine set to come back every single time I visit this page. And you can do that within a window. So it can be for the next week, every time somebody hits that page, they're going to see that announcement. You can have this one announcement appear on multiple pages as well. So it's a very configurable tool, the announcement tool. You can decide where it sits, who sees it, how often they see it, and in what time frame they see it as well. One of my favorite features as well. Now, moving on from that, you will see that I have a little widget up here in the corner. This is my browser extension, and that is how OnScreen gets into your computer. Normally, your IT team will push this out with a workplace policy. We can then take user data from your HR system so it knows who you are and what department you're in. So that, again, that increases that relevancy. It shows that you can decide who sees what. Again, a lot of times whenever we talk to people, they'll say, well, where's your help? Where's your guidance now? And they'll point to a folder in SharePoint that has 3,000 documents and everything's in there. And again, so that becomes a task for people going and finding things. So with OnScreen, you bring the help to them, but you make it relevant. You put it on the page that it's for. You'll see down here, we have this little widget that says need help. Now that's branded with OnScreen logos and colors. We can brand it to anyone's logos and colors. But when I open it, I then get a list of help. And it says in there, one of the first things you can get is resources. A lot of times when people come to OnScreen, they might say, well, I've already created a load of PDFs and some videos and things like that. Is that all now completely useless? Not at all. You can bring those things in and create resource packs with them. Whenever somebody goes to a page, the PDF that you created for that page, you can bring it to the page. So a person doesn't have to go and find it. It's literally on the page that it's made for. So you're bringing it to the person. And things again there, like a great video for somebody coming to Salesforce for the first time might be, what is Salesforce? So it gives them an overview of what it is. You can also have links off to the training portal or like a PDF that opens up as well to start people off. So that's resources. That's another one. So you've got announcements, you've got resources. The other one is actual guides. Again, so if there's a process that a person has to follow in a certain order, you would create a guide. This is one I've created for how to create a new account on Salesforce. So when I click that and open it up, it jumps up to the first step there, and you can put whatever you want in that first step. I've written there, hi, I'm Damien. I'll be your SME. I'll guide you through creating a new customer account. If you get stuck at any point, you can email me, and that's a link to my email, or submit a ticket, and that's a link to our support team. And then there's the instruction. Now let's get started. Select accounts dropdown. So I just do what it says, and the guide auto advances. So again, this is a big thing, and Lindsay touched on that, and a few of you guys said this earlier as well. Most training is separate from the system, and that's what we're doing with OnScreen. We're overlaying it in the system. So even then, we talk to people as well about, well, I've created a load of training in a simulation, but the simulation is not exactly the same as the live environment. This is your live environment, so you can literally have people just have help overlaid on their live environment, and I'm not going away and coming back to it. It's right there. The next instruction then is select new account. Again, I do that. I'll take my hands off. You can see I'm just clicking once, and it automatically jumps to the next step. And then you can see here, this one says, fill in the company name in the account name field, follow this link for the naming convention. Again, I talked to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they said that they reckon their company had lost in the region of £1 million in 1 year simply because of stuff like this, people not filling in data right. And then because of that, decisions were made on that data, and those decisions were wrong. So nipping this in the bud right at the beginning, making sure everyone knows the context. Why is it important to put this information in this way at this point? Well, because the projects team that comes 2 steps after you need this for their resourcing. Okay, right, in that case, then I'll make sure to be more accurate, not guess it, because I'm right at the start of a sales opportunity. So things like that. So you can have a link in there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit this guide for a second and show you something. In here, we can have a feedback. Again, maybe I write a guide, Lindsay goes through it. She might then leave me some feedback that says, Damien, that was a great guide, but I did find step 4 a little bit ambiguous. Could you rewrite that and make it absolutely clear what I need to do? So I can go in, and as Lindsay said, it's very quick and easy to edit existing guides. So that means people are getting the benefit of your guide. You know that they're working as well. But the reason I exit the guide at this point is, again, one of the key points about OnScreen is it knows where you are and it knows what you're doing. When I expand this widget now, it only gives me one option. On the previous page, I had a whole load of options for the home page, but it now knows that I'm in a new account form, and it knows that the only help relevant to what I'm doing right now is this, the new account creation form. And this time when it opens that up, it says, do you want to skip to screen 3? I say yes. And instead of taking me back to the beginning, I click continue, and it'll bring me right back to where I was. It knows I'm a few steps in. It's not going to take me through. So again, OnScreen knows where you are, what you're doing, and it'll take you to the part. Because let's face it, most people would get this far on their own. Most people could figure out account, new account, but then they see this form with a load of fields on it, and they go, okay, so now I could be doing with some guidance here. Other things you can do is I'm in guided mode at the moment, which means it wants me to take me through all the steps in a prescribed order. But if I want to turn that off, maybe I only need help with one thing. Maybe this is a thing I've done before, but the only help I need is with this revenue field. With finance, there's a little PDF there that tells me exactly what information to put in that field. So that's guides. You can auto run guides as well. So again, maybe there is a process that's changed recently and you need people to know it's changed. You can have either an announcement pop up or a guide auto run. And the first step might be, this has changed recently, follow this guide for the new process. So we've tried to think of all the ways that we can communicate with people, let them know that things changed, and let them know this is the latest way to do it. Other things you can do as well is you can have, this will work between applications. It says this will work on any application. One of the major differences between ourselves and some of our competitors as well is we only charge one license fee for the users, but you can use it on as many applications as you want, 5, 10, 50, 1,000, as Lindsay said. It doesn't matter to us. OnScreen just sees them all as URLs. So you can work between them. This link here, actually I'm in Salesforce at the moment. When I click here, that's actually going to take me off to SAP. It'll say, do you want to open a new tab? I'll say yes. That's going to open up a new guide, which I will have to log in here as well. But I'm going to exit the guide and show you the last 2 things that you can do. And that is tooltips, which is right here. Now, I've deliberately left these a really bright green color so you can actually see what I've added to the screen. But when you create these, there is a color picker, so you can pick any color that's already on the screen. But with a tooltip, you can write whatever you want in there. And again, I remember you can put text in, you can put images in, and you can put links in as well. This is one of my favorite examples, this chart of accounts one, because all of those links are for help documents that might live off in different folders in SharePoint or in your Google Drive. But again, rather than somebody having to go look for those, I can bring them all together and say, here's everything you need to fill in this form here. I brought it all together for you, and you can know it's the latest stuff because it's been provided by your L&D team or your operations team. And again, like everything else I've shown you, tooltips can be assigned by team. So maybe I go to this page, I see this set of tooltips, but maybe Andrew goes to this page and he sees an entirely different set of tooltips because he needs different information because he works in a different department. So that is tooltips. And then the very last thing I'm going to show you is launchers. Now, you're all familiar with this website, but up here, you'll see that I've added a button. Well, launcher is a button. It can be text. It can be a beacon. It can launch a tooltip set. It can launch a guide. It can just launch a URL. It can be whatever you need it to be. But it might be something like, if you need more help, click here, and it might be a launch or something to do something else. But if I click it, it's going to take me off to the on-screen page, as you can see there. So I thought it would be useful to, because we're talking about the idea of on-screen, I thought it would be useful to kind of show you what on-screen looks like from the point of view of a user. These are all the different ways you can help. Each of these tools is going to help in different ways. And you might think, oh, an announcement would be fantastic for this, but I am going to need a guide for that. So it can be whatever you need for whatever situation. So that, we find that useful. There is an editing part of that, but I'm not going to get into that today because I don't have time. But if any of you actually want to see a full demo of this, where I can show you the back end, show you the editing and everything as well, I am more than happy to do that. So I'm going to hit stop sharing, and hopefully, Andrew, we'll be right back to where we were. If you can share the slides again, Andrew, yeah.
Sorry about that. I was I clicked on the wrong link for a moment. So we should have back. We should be back.
Yeah.
There we go. We're working.
And that's my last slide. Again, it would be interesting, and for anyone who's interested to see a demo of it, 27 minutes is the average length of time it takes someone to get up to speed with our tool, having never used it before, to be able to create announcements, guides, and tooltips at a level that they would be happy to share with the rest of their team. And I have used many tools in the past, and normally you're talking days, if not weeks, before you would be at a level that you're happy to see something that somebody to see something that you've built. But 27 minutes, because again, all you do is you click one button that says record, you just do your normal process, hit stop, and then you can type in the help. Or we have AI in there now as well. AI will generate all the help text for you. We also have Translate with AI as well if you need multi-language. So that's the actual tool itself, kind of as seen in action from the point of view of a user. But with that, Lindsay.
Thanks, Damien. I'm going to be really quick because I think there were some interesting questions that I've seen coming in, which actually relate to some of this, I think, as well. So just as a final thought, as we say, it's really about kind of engaging and empowering end users. And by end users, we do mean those subject matter experts and those managers, as well as the learners who are actually going to be using the system. Andrew, I don't know whether there was a question, I think, around basically kind of, does this mean that L&D, where was it? Does this mean you don't need an L&D professional to design training content? It could be done by anyone. The SME is the best person to design training content, which I was going to try and answer, if that's okay.
Please dive in.
It is a really interesting question. And I think actually I've been watching the comments as well. And I think everybody is right in this instance. I think it absolutely is about giving those subject matter experts the tools that they need to be able to keep these guides up to date, to create these guides for their people. They may well not have learning and development experience. They might not understand how people learn, but what they do know is what their teams need often. So even if they don't have that learning and development expertise, they may well be best placed to actually help create some of these guides. That said, I think, as you're probably alluding to, Andrew, with some of your comments, is that L&D still has a really important role here. And that is in upskilling those subject matter experts, making sure they understand the tools and they know how to use them to best effect. I mean, I think hopefully you saw with some of the demonstration stuff that Dee showed, there's lots of different ways that we can engage end users. And knowing how to do that well and how to give them the right amount of information, that's very much still in the L&D remit. But it's just about kind of democratizing that access, meaning that if you're really busy or the L&D team are really busy, you haven't got subject matter experts going, well, everything's out of date, what's the point? It means that they can literally go in and update it as they need to. So that's my take on it anyway.
It's really interesting point that so I remember you'd mentioned manuals back in the day, and I had a Pavlovian response to it, because one of the things I had to do was update manuals when I worked in retail banking, and the one building society merged with another building society. The new building society, the one that was being merged with, had to get all of the manuals. 17 foot these manuals were from one end to the other, and they had to be updated. And I had this Pavlovian response, oh my God, how are they going to be updated? And I think it feeds beautifully into Kat's question, which I think is SME input is required, but how do we use the learning professionals' expert knowledge to make sure that they can make, that they can ensure the learning experience is as good as it needs to be. Because I looked at this, God, there's 17 feet worth of modules of manuals. How do we help people understand how to learn that? And it was an absolute nightmare. Kat's question, I think, is really interesting. How do we, value the SME, but our knowledge about how to put that knowledge across? What do we need to do to help SMEs do that?
Show them how to use the tool, you get them to create their first guide, for example, or think about how they might want to use the functionality that's available. And then you critique it, you work with them, you kind of say, okay, well, that bit's great, but maybe you want to think about doing this, or maybe that's a bit too much information here. Could we separate that out and do that differently? It also means that you can focus on some of that more upfront stuff, so like the hearts and minds and the culture piece as well. So I think there's lots of different ways that L&D is still really vital in this process. As I said, it's just about probably reducing some of that almost administrative burden, and allowing L&D to really shine in what they do well and where they're experts.
Fabulous. There's a question here from Simon, which I think is great because you just mentioned culture. How do you manage the culture of 6 generations all in the flow of work, and that expectation that people will want different things? God, my mum, worst person in the world on how to use technology. Whereas, I know my grandson at 7 months old, he's going to be growing up in a world where technology will become the standard. How do we manage that culture across all of those generations, all in the same workflow? Because effectively people will be doing the same work. Mm.
It means that it is there for those people that need it, and can give that extra level of support. As you say, some people will whiz through this stuff, but actually, even as someone that's fairly tech native like myself, I've been using technology a long time, I grew up with it, it's not, there are still times when you get stuck. I think, as Dee alluded to, some of this software is not as usable and user-friendly as we might like it to be. And unfortunately, powerful as it is, it's a lot of legacy software. So that may not change anytime soon. And this just gives a way of kind of smoothing those kind of bumps in the road for our people when they're trying to just get on with their job.
Awesome stuff. There is a book and finding out more. So there's a clickable link on the screen now, so you can download the ebook around uh, the flow of work activity through Learning Pool, and there's also finding out more as well. I am going to leave that on the screen for a moment and take it down in 3, 2, 1, because I have got another link as well for everybody. So we have got the ebook link there. What are the solutions for digital adoption in today's organisations? And that's available to you. Again, that's still a clickable link. And if you want to find out more, there is a Learning Pool page talking about on-screen guidance. Damien said, he's more than happy to go through that with people. Delighted to say we've got the link for that as well. You can see you've got Lindsay's contact details, connection details through LinkedIn, and you've got Damien's, you've got mine as well. Should you, I have no idea why you would, but should you want to connect with me, definitely connect with Lindsay and Damien. I'm just pasted in, let me just do it now. Everybody always asks, well, where's that link? Where's the data? There's the McKinsey link talking about 9 hours a week of people searching for stuff. You will find the recording. Thank you. Both of you, awesome, lovely, brilliant response. What's really interesting with these sessions is I look at the numbers of people who are in the room, and we've had 50 people in the room pretty much all the way through. Sometimes you go to a product demonstration and it disappears, and people start, leaving, and you didn't. So everybody was engaged. We didn't get loads of chat, and we did get loads of questions, but I know people are absolutely focused on this. I've got a little engagement monitor. I can see whether people are on in the room or not, and everybody had the windows open, was listening to you deeply. There's a question from Simon. Simon, Damien and Lindsay will come back to you outside of the room on that one. If you would like to see future webinars, like I said, they will be available on the webinars page, and a recording of this session will be available from Monday. So from Monday morning, you may even get the link tomorrow. You will get a link which will have the recording to the session. Nothing else to say, but absolute massive thank you to Lindsay and to Damien. That was fascinating. I'm going to go back, like I said, through some of the stuff, because I'm immediately thinking how this ties in, and it's come out in the chat. And please do stop by at Learning Technologies. Damien, you're
I'll
going to
be
be
there.
there. Lindsay,
I'm happy to demo this live to anyone who wants to stop by the stand. Yep.
Awesome. Fabulous. Fabulous. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the people who were there. I'll be around Learning Tech as well, so if you are around, please do let me know you're going to be there, and we'll say hi as well. And I'm a worst person in the world with names, so if you go, hi Andrew, I'm so and so, and I'll be like, hi, and I have no idea who you are, please do explain where we've met. I'm going to close the doors on the session now, so let me just hit the stop recording button.